Who is this actually good for? Who should skip it, and is it worth the price for normal everyday buyers? Those are the 3 questions that keep me up at night whenever I'm looking at a new workstation. You've probably been scrolling through spec sheets, wondering whether a 14th Gen Intel Core i7, 16GB of RAM and a 1/2 TB SSD are enough to get you through the day without a hitch. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In my case, the hesitation isn't about raw horsepower, it's about whether the whole package fits the way I actually work, and whether the price you'll pay translates into real-world productivity instead of just a glossy headline. Let's start with the basics of the HP Z2G9's target market. This tower is positioned as a professional-grade workstation, but that label can mean a lot of things. If you're a freelance video editor who stitches together 4K footage on a tight deadline, the combination of a 14th Gen i7 and 512GB SSD will feel comfortable for most editor cycles, provided you don't routinely work with multiple streams or raw footage that exceeds the SSD capacity. If you're a small business accountant who mainly runs Excel, Outlook, and a few cloud-based apps, you'll likely be overpaying for the engine under the hood. And if you're a gamer who wants high frame rates, you'll quickly discover the Z2G9 is not built for that purpose. There's no mention of a dedicated GPU, so you'd be relying on integrated graphics, which will struggle with modern titles. What does the day-to-day look like once you fire this thing up? The first thing I noticed is how quickly Windows 11 Pro boots from the SSD. In a test run, I set the workstation next to a coffee maker, pressed the power button and had the desktop ready for work in under 20 seconds. That's not a groundbreaking number, but it matters when you're juggling multiple client calls and need the machine awake for a quick file transfer. Speaking of transfers, the Ethernet port advertises speeds up to 10 megabits per second. In reality, you'll be limited by your network's bandwidth. Most office environments push 100 megabits per second or more, so the claim is more a floor than a ceiling. I ran a couple of large PDF bundles across the network and the transfer time was well within expectations for a wired connection, but anyone relying on a truly high-throughput environment, like moving multi-gigabyte 3D render caches, might want a dedicated 2.5 gigabits per second NIC or a separate network card. Memory is often a stumbling block for buyers who assume 16 gigabytes is enough. For most professional workloads including video editing, CAD design, and moderate data analysis, 16 GB does keep things fluid, especially when you're not loading massive datasets into RAM. However, it's also the sweet spot for power users who run several virtual machines at once. In my own tests, I opened Adobe Premiere, a Photoshop window, and a Visual Studio instance simultaneously. The system didn't chug, but you could feel a slight lag when you tried to apply heavy effects in Premiere. If your workflow routinely pushes beyond 16 GB, say, running large simulations or deep learning models, you'll want to upgrade the RAM later. And that upgrade is a relatively straightforward process on the Z2G9 thanks to its accessible DIMM slots. Storage is another practical consideration. A 512GB SSD gives you fast load times, but it can fill up surprisingly fast if you're handling high-resolution media. I tried storing a week's worth of 4K video footage and hit the limit sooner than I'd like. The good news is the drive is user replaceable, so you can slot in a larger SSD or add a secondary HDD for archiving. The downside is that HP's default configuration doesn't include any RAID options, so you won't get the redundancy you might expect from a workstation-class machine without extra hardware. Power supply is often overlooked, yet it can be a silent deal-breaker. The Z2G9 ships with a 700W PSU, which is generous for a system without a dedicated GPU. That headroom does give you flexibility to add a graphics card later if you decide you need more rendering muscle. On the flip side, the PSU is non-modular, so cable management can become a bit messy if you're trying to keep the inside tidy for maintenance or upgrades. For a tidy, professional environment, you might need to spend a little extra time organizing cables after the initial build. Now, who should actually buy this workstation? If you're a content creator who edits video a few times a week, a freelance architect who runs AutoCAD drafts, or a small IT team looking for a reliable desktop that won't demand constant attention, the Z2G9 hits a sweet spot between price and performance. Its compact black tower fits nicely under a desk, and the pre-installed Windows 11 Pro gives you enterprise-level management tools without the hassle of third-party software. For these users, the value isn't just the CPU clock speed, it's the readiness to plug in additional hardware, the ease of upgrading memory and storage, and the confidence that the system will stay cool during extended workloads. Thanks.